Captain Zarek clicked his mandibles in satisfaction as his fleet of 12 Vorthak raiders emerged from hyperspace. The human cargo vessel hung in the void ahead, completely unaware of the danger approaching from behind the asteroid field. Its hull gleamed white against the star-scattered darkness, displaying the simple merchant markings of the Terran Trade Consortium. The bridge of Zarek's flagship buzzed with anticipation. His crew had been hunting for weeks, searching for an easy target to justify their latest raid into human territory. The Vorthak Empire had been testing human resolve for months, probing their trade routes and challenging their expansion into the Outer Rim territories. "Captain," hissed his tactical officer, "the vessel appears to be a standard Class 7 freighter. No escort ships detected. Minimal defensive capabilities according to our database." Zarek's 4 eyes gleamed with predatory hunger. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic stage, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 3 decades ago. Most species viewed them as weak, soft creatures who relied too heavily on technology rather than natural strength. Their ships were built for commerce, not war, making them perfect targets for piracy. "Excellent. Begin jamming their communications array. I want no distress signals reaching human space," Zarek commanded. His voice carried the authority of someone who had successfully raided dozens of merchant vessels across the galaxy. The human freighter, designated as the cargo ship Meridian, continued its steady course toward the jump point. Its captain, Elena Vasquez, was reviewing quarterly shipping reports when her communications officer suddenly looked up from his console with concern. "Captain, we're experiencing interference with our long-range communications. Could be solar interference from the nearby star, but the readings are inconsistent," reported Lieutenant Chen. Elena frowned and moved to the sensor station. 20 years of deep space trading had taught her to trust her instincts, and something felt wrong about this situation. The Meridian was carrying medical supplies and agricultural equipment to the colony world of New Geneva, a routine run she had made dozens of times. "Run a full sensor sweep of the surrounding area. Check for any anomalies," she ordered. Before the sensor operator could comply, 12 Vorthak warships decloaked simultaneously, surrounding the Meridian in a perfect attack formation. The alien vessels were angular and predatory in design, their dark hulls bristling with weapons arrays that could reduce the freighter to scrap metal in seconds. Zarek opened a communication channel, his translator converting his alien language into standard galactic trade speak. "Human vessel, you have entered Vorthak sovereign space without permission. Surrender your cargo and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in the destruction of your ship." Elena felt ice form in her stomach, but her voice remained steady as she responded. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the merchant vessel Meridian. We are traveling through neutral space according to all galactic navigation charts. We have no quarrel with the Vorthak Empire." A harsh laugh echoed through the communication channel. "Neutral space belongs to whoever has the strongest weapons, human. Your species is weak and your ships are defenseless. You will submit or you will die." The Vorthak ships began moving into boarding positions, their weapon systems powered up and ready to fire. Elena knew that her ship's minimal defensive systems would be completely ineffective against 12 military-grade warships. The Meridian was designed for cargo capacity and fuel efficiency, not combat. However, what Captain Zarek did not know was that the Meridian carried more than just medical supplies and farming equipment. Hidden deep within her cargo holds, carefully disguised among the legitimate shipping containers, was a highly classified piece of human military technology being transported to New Geneva's defense installation. Elena activated a secure emergency protocol that very few merchant captains even knew existed. A hidden transmitter, powered by the ship's main reactor and completely separate from the standard communications array, began broadcasting a specific signal into space. The signal was designed to penetrate hyperspace and reach any human military vessels within 3 light-years of their position. "All crew members, prepare for potential boarding action," Elena announced over the ship's intercom. "Seal all internal bulkheads and activate emergency protocols." The Vorthak boarding craft approached the Meridian like hungry predators closing in on wounded prey. Zarek was already planning how he would divide the captured cargo among his fleet and how much ransom he could demand for the human crew members. What he could not have known was that his decision to attack the Meridian had just triggered the most comprehensive military response in human history. The emergency signal was not just a distress call, It was a declaration that human civilians were under attack, and it carried authorization codes that would mobilize every available military asset in the sector. 3 light-years away, the human dreadnought Retribution received the emergency transmission. Admiral Sarah Mitchell, a veteran of the colony wars, immediately understood the implications. An attack on human civilians in supposedly neutral space was an act of war, and the Terran Defense Force had been preparing for this moment since humanity first ventured into the galaxy. All ships, emergency jump to coordinates transmitted. Battle stations. This is not a drill, Admiral Mitchell commanded, her voice carrying across the fleet communications network. The Vorthak raiders continued their approach to the Meridian, completely unaware that they had just made the worst mistake in their species' history. The Vorthak boarding pods attached to the Meridian's hull with metallic thuds that echoed through the ship's corridors. Elena watched from the bridge as cutting torches began burning through the outer airlock doors. Her crew had sealed themselves into the secured sections of the ship, following emergency protocols that most merchant vessels never expected to use. Captain Zarek supervised the boarding operation from his flagship's command center, his confidence growing with each passing moment. The human ship had offered no resistance beyond sealing a few doors, exactly what he expected from a species that preferred trade negotiations to military confrontation. Boarding teams report successful breach of the outer hull, announced his tactical officer. Resistance appears minimal. The humans are hiding in their sealed compartments like frightened younglings. Zarek's mandibles clicked with amusement. His raiders had perfected the art of breaking merchant vessels across dozens of successful operations. Cutting through sealed doors was a simple matter when you had military-grade plasma torches and shaped charges. Meanwhile, aboard the Meridian, Elena was coordinating with her crew through the ship's internal communication system. Her chief engineer, a gruff veteran named Rodriguez, had managed to seal the most critical sections of the ship and was monitoring the Vorthak progress through internal sensors. Captain, they're through the main airlock. 12 raiders heavily armed moving toward Cargo Bay 7. Rodriguez reported. Should we activate the automated defense systems? Elena shook her head. The Meridian's defensive capabilities were limited to a few automated turrets designed to repel pirates. Nothing that could seriously threaten military-trained Vorthak warriors. Negative. Hold position and wait for my signal. Remember, our job is to stay alive until help arrives. What neither Elena nor Zarek realized was that help was arriving much faster than anyone could have anticipated. The emergency signal transmitted by the Meridian had not only reached Admiral Mitchell's fleet but had also triggered automated response protocols throughout human space. The Terran Defense Force had learned harsh lessons during humanity's early years in space. Pirates, raiders, and hostile aliens had targeted human ships with impunity, viewing the newcomer species as easy prey. After losing too many merchant vessels and civilian crews, humanity had developed a comprehensive protection doctrine. Every human civilian ship carried hidden transmitters capable of alerting military forces across vast distances. More importantly, the destruction or capture of any human vessel triggered an automatic escalation protocol that treated such attacks as acts of war against humanity. Itself, Admiral Mitchell's fleet of 15 warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the star system, their sensors immediately locking onto the Vorthak raiders surrounding the Meridian. The human fleet consisted of 3 heavy dreadnoughts, 6 cruisers, and 6 destroyers, representing enough firepower to level a small planet. Admiral, we have visual confirmation of 12 Vorthak vessels engaged in hostile action against the merchant ship Meridian, reported the fleet's tactical coordinator. Boarding action appears to be in progress. Admiral Mitchell studied the tactical display with cold fury. She had spent her entire career protecting human interests in space, and she had never forgotten the lesson her mentor had taught her decades ago. In space, you're either the predator or the prey. Make sure everyone knows which one humanity chooses to be. Open a channel to the Vorthak commander, she ordered. Back on Zarek's flagship, the bridge crew suddenly detected the human fleet's arrival. Warning alarms began blaring as sensors registered the massive energy signatures of military-grade warships emerging from hyperspace. Captain, we have 15 human warships entering the system, his tactical officer reported, his voice carrying a note of concern that had not been there moments before. Zarek's confidence wavered for the first time during the raid. 15 warships represented a significant military force, far more than should have been available to respond to a simple merchant vessel's distress call. Incoming. Transmission from the human fleet, his communications officer announced. Admiral Mitchell's face appeared on the main screen, her expression cold and implacable. This is Admiral Sarah Mitchell of the Terran Defense Force. You are engaged in hostile action against human civilians in neutral space. You have 60 seconds to withdraw your forces and release the merchant vessel, or we will consider this an act of war. Zarek straightened his posture, attempting to project the same confidence he had felt earlier. Admiral, we are conducting legitimate salvage operations in Vorthak territorial space. Your merchant vessel was trespassing and has been detained according to galactic law. 60 seconds, Admiral Mitchell repeated, her voice carrying no emotion whatsoever. Choose wisely. The Vorthak captain faced a dilemma that many alien commanders had encountered when dealing with humans. The species appeared weak and peaceful during normal trade negotiations, leading many to underestimate their military capabilities. However, humans possessed a unique trait that made them extraordinarily dangerous when provoked. They did not bluff. Captain, the human fleet is assuming attack formations, reported Zarek's tactical officer. Their weapon systems are powering up. Energy readings indicate they are prepared for immediate combat. Zarek realized that he had made a critical error in judgment. The human response was far too quick and far too massive for a simple merchant rescue operation. This suggested that humanity had been preparing for exactly this type of confrontation. Recall all boarding parties immediately, he commanded. Prepare for emergency hyperspace jump. However, it was already too late. Admiral Mitchell had not intended to give the Vorthak raiders 60 seconds to consider their options. She had given them 60 seconds to realize the magnitude of their mistake, before humanity demonstrated why attacking human civilians was considered a fatal error in judgment. The countdown reached 0, and the Admiral's next words would echo through galactic history. All ships weapons free. Show them what happens when you threaten human lives. The space around the meridian erupted into chaos as the human fleet opened fire. The first salvo from Admiral Mitchell's dreadnought struck 3 Vorthak raiders simultaneously, their plasma cannons and railgun batteries delivering devastating firepower that overwhelmed the alien ship's defensive shields in seconds. Captain Zarek watched in horror as his raiders, vessels he had considered formidable warships, were systematically destroyed by weapons that seemed impossibly advanced. The human ships moved with precision and coordination that spoke of extensive military training and combat experience. Return fire. All ships concentrate on the lead human vessel, Zarek commanded, his voice cracking under the stress of seeing his fleet being dismantled. The Vorthak ships turned their weapons toward the human dreadnought Retribution, launching everything they had. Plasma bolts, missile salvos, and particle beam weapons converged on Admiral Mitchell's flagship, creating a brilliant display of destructive energy. The attack struck the Retribution's shields and dissipated harmlessly, the human defensive systems absorbing and redistributing the energy with ease. The alien weapons, which could have crippled most galactic military vessels, barely registered on the dreadnought's defensive grid. Shields holding at 98%, reported the Retribution's tactical officer. Minimal impact from enemy weapons. Admiral Mitchell nodded grimly. The technological gap between human and Vorthak military capabilities was even wider than intelligence reports had suggested. Humanity's rapid advancement in military technology had caught most galactic species by surprise. Continue firing. Target their engines first. I want them disabled, not destroyed. We need prisoners for interrogation, she ordered. The human fleet's next volley was surgical in its precision. Instead of destroying the remaining Vorthak ships outright, the weapons operators targeted specific systems with accuracy that defied belief. Engine sections exploded in controlled bursts, weapon systems overloaded and shut down, and life support systems were damaged just enough to force the aliens into survival mode. Aboard the Meridian, Elena and her crew felt the ship shake as the Vorthak boarding parties attempted to fight their way to the emergency escape pods. The raiders had realized that their ships were being systematically destroyed and were desperate to escape before the human fleet turned its attention to eliminating witnesses. Rodriguez, can you seal the escape pod bays? Elena asked over the intercom. Already on it, Captain. Those bastards aren't going anywhere, her chief engineer replied. The sound of plasma cutters and explosions echoed through, the ship as the Vorthak troops tried to blast through sealed bulkheads. What the Vorthak raiders did not know was that human merchant ships had been designed with military advice following early pirate attacks. The seemingly simple cargo vessel had hidden defensive measures that could trap boarders and prevent them from sabotaging critical systems. Captain Zarek's flagship was one of the last three Vorthak ships still capable of movement, but its weapons were offline and its shields had collapsed. He watched helplessly as human boarding craft launched from the destroyers, approaching his vessel with the same methodical precision that had characterized their attack. "Captain, incoming transmission from the human admiral," his communications officer reported. Admiral Mitchell's image appeared again, but this time her expression showed grim satisfaction rather than cold anger. "Captain Zarek, I am offering you one opportunity to surrender unconditionally. Your remaining ships will be taken into custody. Your crews will be detained and you will answer for your attack on human civilians." Zarek's mandibles clicked in frustration and defeat. His raid had been a complete disaster, and he was facing the total destruction of his fleet and the capture of his crew. However, what troubled him most was the realization that humanity's response had been too swift and too overwhelming to be accidental. "How did your fleet arrive so quickly?" he demanded. No military force could have responded to a distress signal in such a short time. Admiral Mitchell's smile was cold and predatory. "That's where you made your first mistake, Captain. You assumed that the Meridian was an undefended merchant vessel. In reality, every human civilian ship is protected by the full might of the Terran Defense Force." The Admiral continued her explanation, wanting the Vorthak commander to understand the magnitude of his error. "When you attacked that ship, you didn't just threaten a single crew or a cargo of medical supplies. You declared war on every human citizen in the galaxy." The truth was even more devastating than Zarek could have imagined. Humanity had spent decades developing a comprehensive defense network that treated any attack on civilian vessels as an assault on human civilization itself. Hidden relay stations throughout space ensured that emergency signals could reach military forces across vast distances in minutes rather than hours. More importantly, the human military had adopted a doctrine of overwhelming response to any threat against their civilians. The goal was not just to rescue attacked vessels, but to send a message to every potential aggressor in the galaxy. The message was simple. Attacking humans carried consequences that far outweighed any possible benefit. As human Marines began cutting through the hull of his flagship, Zarek realized that his raid had accomplished something he never intended. Instead of proving that humans were weak and vulnerable, he had demonstrated that humanity was willing and able to respond to threats with devastating military force. The boarding party that entered his ship was equipped with advanced combat armor and weapons that made his raiders look primitive by comparison. The human soldiers moved through his vessel with professional efficiency, securing crew members and gathering intelligence about Vorthak military capabilities. "Admiral, all enemy vessels have been secured," reported the Marine commander. "Casualties are minimal on both sides. We have 47 Vorthak prisoners ready for interrogation." Admiral Mitchell nodded with satisfaction. The operation had gone exactly according to plan, demonstrating human military superiority while gathering valuable intelligence about potential enemies. However, the real impact of the day's events would not be felt until news of the engagement spread throughout the galaxy, carrying with it a new understanding of humanity's place among the stars. 3 days after the engagement, news of the Vorthak raid and humanity's response spread through galactic communication networks like wildfire. The speed and decisiveness of the human military reaction shocked governments and military leaders across dozens of species. On the Vorthak homeworld of Kethtar, High Commander Vexthul studied the battle reports with growing alarm. 12 of his raiders had been defeated by a human fleet that appeared within minutes of the initial attack. The technological superiority demonstrated by the human warships suggested that the Vorthak Empire had seriously underestimated their new neighbors. "How is this possible?" Vexthul demanded of his intelligence officers. "Our reports indicated that human military technology was inferior to our own. These battle recordings show weapons and defensive systems that surpass anything in our arsenal." His chief analyst, a seasoned military strategist named Kixtal, had been reviewing captured sensor data from Captain Zarek's failed raid. "High Commander, it appears that our intelligence was based on outdated information. Human technology has advanced at an unprecedented rate since their first contact with galactic civilization. The truth was more disturbing than any Vorthak leader could have imagined. Humanity had deliberately allowed other species to underestimate their military capabilities, while secretly developing advanced technologies in hidden research facilities. The merchant vessels that traveled galactic trade routes were indeed lightly armed, but they served as bait for a comprehensive defense network. Meanwhile, in the Galactic Council chambers on the neutral world of Nexus Prime, representatives from dozens of species gathered for an emergency session. The human attack on the Vorthak raiders had violated several interstellar treaties regarding proportional response to piracy incidents. Ambassador Talara of the Zenithian Commonwealth stood before the assembled delegates, her crystalline features reflecting the chamber's lighting as she spoke. The human response to this incident was excessive and dangerous. 12 ships destroyed or captured for attacking a single merchant vessel sets a precedent that could destabilize the entire region. However, the human representative, Ambassador David Chen, was prepared for this criticism. He had spent years navigating galactic politics and understood that humanity's survival depended on establishing clear boundaries with potential aggressors. Honored delegates, Ambassador Chen began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. The attack on the Meridian was not an isolated incident of piracy. It was a deliberate probe of human defenses by the Vorthak Empire, intended to test our resolve and military capabilities. He activated a holographic display showing recent Vorthak military movements near human territory. Over the past 6 months, Vorthak forces have conducted 17 reconnaissance missions into human space. They have harassed our trade routes, challenged our patrol vessels, and now they have attacked our civilians. The evidence was damning. The Vorthak Empire had indeed been systematically testing human defenses, treating the newcomer species as potential prey rather than legitimate neighbors. What they had discovered was that humanity was far from defenseless. Our response was measured and appropriate, Chen continued. We disabled rather than destroyed the enemy vessels. We captured rather than eliminated their crews. We demonstrated that attacks on human civilians will not be tolerated, but we did so without unnecessary loss of life. In the detention facilities aboard Admiral Mitchell's fleet, Captain Zarek and his surviving crew members were experiencing firsthand the efficiency of human military operations. Their interrogation was conducted with professional courtesy, but relentless thoroughness. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Kim, the fleet's intelligence officer, sat across from Zarek in a sterile interrogation room. Captain, your cooperation could help prevent a larger conflict between our species. We need to understand the Vorthak Empire's intentions regarding human territory. Zarek studied the human officer with his 4 eyes, noting the calm confidence that seemed to characterize every human he had encountered. You claim to want peace, yet you destroyed my fleet without hesitation. We defended our civilians, Kim replied simply. That's not aggression, Captain. That's responsibility. Every species has the right to protect their people from unprovoked attacks. The interrogation revealed information that confirmed human intelligence assessments. The Vorthak Empire had been planning a larger campaign against human settlements, viewing the relatively new species as an easy target for territorial expansion. Back on Earth, President Maria Santos convened an emergency meeting of the Terran Defense Council. The successful defense of the Meridian had demonstrated that humanity's military capabilities were sufficient to deter aggression, but it had also revealed the need for a more comprehensive strategy. Admiral Mitchell's response was perfect, commented General Harrison Webb, chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Quick, decisive, and overwhelming. We sent exactly the message we intended to send. President Santos nodded, but her expression remained concerned. The question now is whether other species will test us the same way the Vorthak did. We need to be prepared for the possibility that our demonstration of strength will provoke, rather than deter aggression. The president was correct to be concerned. Throughout the galaxy, military leaders and government officials were re-evaluating their assessments of human capabilities. Some species began viewing humanity with new respect, recognizing that the newcomers were not the easy targets they had appeared to be. Others, however, saw the human military response as a threat that needed to be addressed before it could grow stronger. The Krextani hegemony, a militaristic alliance of 6 warrior species, began planning joint military exercises near human territory. The Zephyrian Trade Federation, which controlled several major shipping routes, started restricting human access to their space stations and commercial facilities. They claimed the restrictions were for security purposes, but everyone understood the real message. Humanity's neighbors were choosing sides, and not all of them were choosing friendship. Meanwhile, Captain Elena Vasquez and her crew had been safely evacuated from the Meridian and were undergoing debriefing on Admiral Mitchell's flagship. The merchant captain had become an unwitting hero, her emergency protocols having triggered the most significant human military victory in decades. "Captain Vasquez, your actions may have prevented a larger war," Admiral Mitchell told her during their meeting. "The intelligence we gathered from those Vorthak ships will help us prepare for future threats." Elena nodded, but she could not shake the feeling that her rescue had set larger events in motion. "Admiral, what happens now? Will the Vorthak try again?" Admiral Mitchell's expression was grim but determined. "That depends on whether they learned the right lesson from today's engagement. Some species understand strength when they see it, others only understand it when they feel it." 6 weeks after the Meridian incident, the Krextani hegemony made their move. A combined fleet of 36 warships from 6 different warrior species dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, where humanity had established its newest colony. The colony world of Haven was home to nearly 2 million human settlers and represented humanity's most ambitious terraforming project. The planet's transformation from a barren rock into a garden world had taken 15 years and demonstrated human technological capabilities that many species found threatening. Fleet Commander Zax Thor of the Krextani examined the tactical display from his flagship's bridge. His force represented the most powerful military alliance in the Outer Rim territories, a coalition of species that had dominated this region of space for over 2 centuries. "Begin long-range bombardment of the human orbital stations," he commanded. "Destroy their defensive platforms and communication arrays. We will show the galaxy that humanity's recent victory was merely luck." The Krextani had spent weeks analyzing the battle recordings from the Vorthak raid, convinced that they could identify weaknesses in human military doctrine. Their fleet included ships from the warrior cultures of 6 different species, each contributing their unique combat specializations. What they did not know was that human intelligence services had been monitoring their military buildup for weeks. The attack on Haven was not a surprise, it was an opportunity. Admiral Sarah Mitchell, now commanding a task force of 42 human warships, had positioned her fleet in the outer system, hidden behind the gas giant Goliath and its extensive ring system. The human ships used advanced stealth technology that rendered them effectively invisible to conventional sensors. "Admiral, the Krextani fleet has engaged our outer defensive perimeter," reported Captain James Parker, commanding officer of the heavy cruiser Dauntless. "Haven's orbital platforms are under bombardment." Mitchell studied the tactical display with cold satisfaction. The Krextani had made the same mistake as the Vorthak, assuming that humanity's defensive capabilities were limited to what could be observed. The orbital platforms under attack were decoys, heavily shielded installations designed to absorb punishment while providing targeting data for the hidden human fleet. "Signal all ships. Begin Phase 1 of Operation Hammer," Mitchell ordered. The human fleet emerged from concealment with devastating effect. Advanced jamming systems disrupted Krextani communications, while targeting computers locked onto enemy vessels with precision that defied belief. The opening salvo from humanity's largest warship struck 6 alien vessels simultaneously, crippling their engines and weapon systems. Fleet Commander Zax Thor watched in shock as his carefully planned assault dissolved into chaos. The human ships moved with coordination that suggested they had been prepared for this exact scenario, their weapons demonstrating destructive capabilities that exceeded even optimistic intelligence estimates. "How are they here so quickly?" demanded Yargoth, his Brutarian tactical officer. "Our scouts reported no human military presence in this system." The answer came in the form of a communication from Admiral Mitchell herself. Her image appeared on the main screen of every Krextani vessel, her expression combining professional courtesy with unmistakable menace. "Fleet Commander Zax Thor, this is Admiral Sarah Mitchell of the Terran Defense Force. You are conducting an unprovoked attack on human civilians. You have 2 minutes to cease hostilities and withdraw from this system, or we will demonstrate why attacking humanity is considered a fatal error in judgment. Zaxthor's confidence crumbled as he realized the magnitude of his miscalculation. The human fleet outnumbered his forces and demonstrated technological superiority that made resistance futile. However, pride and military doctrine demanded that he attempt to salvage the situation. Human Admiral, we are acting under the authority of the Krextani hegemony to remove a threat to galactic stability. Your species has proven itself to be dangerously aggressive and must be contained. Mitchell's response was swift and uncompromising. 2 minutes, Commander. Choose wisely. Meanwhile, on Haven's surface, Colonial Administrator Rebecca Walsh coordinated the evacuation of non-essential personnel while monitoring the space battle through the colony's sensor network. The attack had come as no surprise to human leadership, but the colonists were seeing their first taste of interstellar warfare. Administrator, we have confirmation that Admiral Mitchell's fleet has engaged the attackers, reported her military liaison, Colonel Martinez. The orbital battle appears to be going in our favor. Walsh nodded, but her attention was focused on the larger implications of the attack. 2 major alien powers had now tested human defenses, and both had discovered that humanity was far from the easy target they had expected. The countdown reached 0, and Admiral Mitchell demonstrated why humanity had earned its reputation for decisive action. The second wave of human attacks was not designed to disable, it was designed to destroy. Krextani vessels began exploding in brilliant flashes of light as human weapons found their targets with surgical precision. The alien shields, which had protected their ships through dozens of successful campaigns, collapsed under the focused assault of humanity's most advanced military technology. Retreat! All ships, emergency hyperspace jump! Zaxthor commanded, his voice cracking under the stress of watching his fleet being systematically annihilated. However, escape was not an option. Human ships had deployed hyperspace inhibitor fields around the battle area, trapping the Krextani fleet in normal space where they could be methodically hunted down and destroyed. Of the 36 ships that had attacked Haven, only 7 managed to escape when Admiral Mitchell allowed a brief window in the inhibitor field. The survivors would carry word of humanity's military capabilities back to their respective governments, along with a message that attacks on human civilians would not be tolerated. The Battle of Haven lasted less than 4 hours, but its impact would resonate throughout the galaxy for decades. 2 major alien powers had now learned that humanity was not the weak, defenseless species they had appeared to be. More importantly, other galactic civilizations began to understand that humans possessed something that made them uniquely dangerous among spacefaring species. They had developed their military capabilities in secret, while maintaining a facade of peaceful traders and explorers. When threatened, they responded with overwhelming force and tactical brilliance that suggested extensive preparation for exactly these types of conflicts. They did not negotiate with aggressors or accept partial victories. They eliminated threats completely and decisively. The message was spreading throughout the galaxy. Humanity was not prey. They were predators who had been disguised as prey, and any species that failed to recognize this distinction would face consequences that could destroy their entire civilization. In the aftermath of the battle, Admiral Mitchell stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the debris field that had once been the pride of the Krextani hegemony. Her communications officer approached with a priority message from Earth. Admiral, President Santos sends her congratulations on another successful operation. She also wants to know your assessment of future threats. Mitchell considered the question carefully before responding. Tell the President that we have successfully established our position as a major military power. However, our very success may provoke larger coalitions to form against us. We need to be prepared for the possibility that our next challenge will be much bigger than anything we have faced so far. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session 3 months after the Battle of Haven. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall, their diverse forms creating a spectacular display of galactic biodiversity. However, the beauty of the gathering could not mask the underlying tension that had gripped the galaxy since humanity's military demonstrations. Chancellor Mordun of the Altarian Republic called the session to order, his ancient features showing the strain of recent diplomatic challenges. Fellow delegates, we are here to address the growing concern regarding human military expansion and their doctrine of excessive retaliation. Ambassador Chen sat calmly in the human delegation section, knowing that this session would determine whether humanity would be accepted as a legitimate galactic power or branded as a threat to be contained. The accusations against his species were predictable but dangerous. The humans have demonstrated a pattern of disproportionate response to minor provocations, declared Ambassador Kivex of the Tenthari Assembly. 2 separate incidents involving their civilian vessels have resulted in the destruction of nearly 50 alien warships. This aggression threatens the stability of our entire region. A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembly hall. Many species had grown concerned about humanity's apparent willingness to use overwhelming force against any perceived threat. The speed and efficiency of human military responses suggested a level of preparation that some found disturbing. Ambassador Chen rose to address the assembly, his voice carrying clearly across the vast chamber. Honored delegates, the human government appreciates this opportunity to clarify our position on defensive operations and civilian protection. He activated a holographic display showing the recent attacks on human vessels and colonies. The incidents that concern this body were not responses to minor provocations. They were defensive actions against unprovoked attacks on human civilians by military forces intent on conquest and exploitation. The evidence was compelling. Both the Vorthak raid and the Krextani assault had been carefully planned, military operations designed to test or eliminate human presence in space. Neither had been the result of misunderstandings or accidents. Our response doctrine is simple and transparent, Chen continued. Any attack on human civilians will be met with sufficient force to ensure that such attacks are not repeated. We do not seek conquest or territorial expansion, but we will defend our people with every resource at our disposal. However, the real challenge came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Thexaval of the Ancient Progenitor Collective requested permission to address the assembly, his presence commanding immediate attention from every delegate in the hall. The progenitors were among the oldest spacefaring civilizations in the galaxy, having achieved interstellar travel when most species were still discovering fire. Their technological capabilities were legendary, and their military forces were rumored to be beyond anything possessed by younger species. Young humans, Thexval began, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. Your recent actions have drawn our attention. The collective has observed your species since your first ventures into space, and we have noted certain concerning characteristics. Ambassador Chen felt ice form in his stomach. A confrontation with the progenitor collective was humanity's worst nightmare scenario. The ancient species possessed technology that could potentially sterilize entire star systems, and their military doctrine was based on preventing younger civilizations from becoming threats. We have seen species like yours before, the progenitor ambassador continued. Aggressive, technologically advanced, convinced of their own superiority. Most of them are now extinct, their worlds reduced to ash by the necessity of maintaining galactic stability. The threat was clear, and every delegate in the assembly understood its implications. The progenitor collective was offering humanity a choice: moderate their behavior or face extinction at the hands of the galaxy's most advanced civilization. However, Ambassador Chen had been prepared for this moment. Human intelligence services had spent years studying progenitor history and military doctrine, searching for any advantage that might help humanity survive such a confrontation. Ambassador Thexval, humanity appreciates the collective's concern for galactic stability, Chen replied carefully. However, our actions have been defensive in nature, designed to protect our civilians from unprovoked aggression. We have not initiated conflicts or threatened established galactic powers. What Chen did not reveal was that humanity had been preparing for exactly this scenario since their first contact with galactic civilization. Hidden research facilities throughout human space had been developing technologies specifically designed to counter progenitor advantages, while military strategists had been planning defensive campaigns that could potentially survive an assault by superior forces. The progenitor ambassador studied the human representative with ancient eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Your defensive preparations are impressive, young human. More impressive than you realize. However, the collective has decided to offer humanity an alternative to the usual. Resolution of such situations. Thexval activated his own holographic display, showing a star map of the galaxy's outer rim territories. The collective will sponsor humanity's membership in the Galactic Council and guarantee your species' territorial integrity. In exchange, you will serve as our enforcement arm for maintaining order among the younger species. The offer was both generous and terrifying. Progenitor sponsorship would guarantee humanity's survival and provide access to advanced technologies beyond current human capabilities. However, it would also make humanity responsible for policing other species on behalf of the galaxy's oldest power. Ambassador Chen realized that this moment would define humanity's future among the stars. Accept the progenitor offer, and humanity would become junior partners in maintaining galactic order. Refuse, and they would face the combined might of civilizations that had been perfecting warfare for millions of years. The human government will need time to consider such a significant proposal, Chen replied diplomatically. Thexval nodded, his ancient features showing something that might have been approval. Of course. However, understand that this offer will not remain available indefinitely. The collective has learned that young species must be guided carefully, or they become threats that require permanent solutions. As the assembly session concluded, Ambassador Chen transmitted an emergency communication to Earth. President Santos and her advisors would need to make the most important decision in human history, one that would determine whether humanity would survive as an independent civilization or become servants of powers beyond their comprehension. Meanwhile, Admiral Mitchell was reviewing intelligence reports from the frontier regions, where increased alien military activity suggested that other species were forming coalitions to address the human problem. The successful defense of Haven had prevented immediate attacks, but it had also convinced potential enemies that coordination would be necessary to overcome human military capabilities. The galaxy was choosing sides, and humanity was running out of time to decide which side they wanted to be on. 6 months after the progenitor offer, President Santos stood before the Terran Defense Council with the most consequential decision in human history weighing on her shoulders. The hidden conference room beneath Geneva housed the most classified discussion in human civilization, one that would determine whether humanity would remain independent or accept subordination to galactic powers. The intelligence reports are clear, General Webb announced to the assembled leaders. 17 species have formed the Coalition of Concerned Worlds, ostensibly to address human aggression, but actually to plan a coordinated military response. They're calling it a preventive action to maintain galactic stability. Admiral Mitchell, recently promoted to Supreme Commander of Terran Forces, provided the military assessment. Our defensive capabilities are sufficient to repel attacks from individual species or small alliances. However, a coordinated assault by 17 civilizations would overwhelm our current resources. Regardless of our technological advantages, President Santos studied the faces around the table, seeing the weight of responsibility in every expression. What about the progenitor offer? Would their sponsorship actually protect us from this coalition? Ambassador Chen, recently returned from months of delicate negotiations, provided the diplomatic perspective. The progenitors are sincere in their offer, but their protection comes with permanent strings attached. We would become their enforcement arm, responsible for suppressing any species that threatens galactic stability. Essentially, we would become the galaxy's police force under progenitor authority. The irony was not lost on anyone in the room. Humanity's fierce independence and refusal to be intimidated had earned them respect throughout the galaxy, but it had also made them too dangerous to ignore. Their choice now was between subordination and annihilation. However, Dr. Sarah Kim, Director of Advanced Research Projects, had been quietly working on a third option. Madam President, I believe there is another alternative that we have not fully explored. She activated a holographic display showing classified research data from humanity's most secret facilities. For the past 2 years, we have been developing technologies based on theoretical frameworks that exceed anything currently possessed by known galactic civilizations, including the progenitors. The display showed weapon systems, defensive technologies, and propulsion methods that seemed to belong in science fiction rather than military planning. However, Dr. Kim's presentation was backed by extensive testing data and prototype demonstrations. Our research suggests that the progenitors, despite their technological superiority, have been using essentially the same scientific principles for thousands of years. They have refined their technologies to incredible levels, but they have not made fundamental breakthroughs in the underlying physics. President Santos leaned forward, intrigued by the possibility that humanity might have discovered something that the galaxy's oldest civilization had missed. Are you suggesting that we have developed technologies superior to progenitor capabilities? Dr. Kim nodded grimly. In certain limited areas, yes. Our quantum manipulation technologies and dimensional engineering applications appear to be genuinely revolutionary. However, we have never tested them against progenitor systems, and we have no way of knowing whether they would be effective in actual combat. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Humanity had potentially developed technologies that could level the playing field against any galactic power. But using them would mean risking everything on untested theories and experimental weapons. Admiral Mitchell broke the silence with a question that had been troubling military planners for months. Dr. Kim, what are the risks of revealing these capabilities? Once we demonstrate advanced technologies, every species in the galaxy will either want to acquire them or destroy us to prevent their spread. That's exactly the point, Admiral, Dr. Kim replied. If we are going to remain independent, we need to demonstrate capabilities that make attacking us not just difficult, but genuinely terrifying to contemplate. President Santos made her decision with the calm authority that had carried her through decades of political leadership. We will not accept subordination to any galactic power, regardless of their age or technological superiority. Humanity will remain free, or we will make our enemies pay a price that serves as a warning to the entire galaxy. The plan that emerged from that meeting was ambitious beyond anything humanity had previously attempted. Rather than waiting for the coalition of concerned worlds to attack human territory, Admiral Mitchell would take a fleet equipped with humanity's most advanced experimental technologies directly to the coalition staging area. The message would be simple but unmistakable. Humanity was not prey, and any species that treated them as such would discover why humans had become the galaxy's apex predators in less than a century of spaceflight. 3 weeks later, Admiral Mitchell's task force of 36 warships arrived at the Nexus Gamma system, where the coalition fleet was conducting final preparations for their assault on human space. The alien armada consisted of over 300 vessels, representing the combined military might of 17 civilizations. Coalition Fleet Commander Zeftul of the Veltheran Empire watched with growing alarm as sensors detected the approaching human ships. The enemy force was vastly outnumbered, but their confidence in challenging such overwhelming odds suggested capabilities that intelligence reports had failed to identify. Human fleet. You are trespassing in coalition space, Zeftul transmitted. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences of your aggression. Admiral Mitchell's response was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every ship in both fleets could hear her words. Coalition forces, this is Admiral Sarah Mitchell of the Terran Defense Force. You have assembled a military force for the purpose of attacking human civilians and destroying human colonies. This action constitutes an act of war against humanity. She paused, allowing the weight of her words to sink in before continuing. You have one opportunity to disperse your forces and abandon this aggressive action. If you choose to proceed with your attack, you will discover why challenging humanity is considered a fatal error in judgment throughout this galaxy. The coalition fleet responded with immediate hostility, launching the largest coordinated assault in recent galactic history. Over 300 alien warships opened fire simultaneously, creating a destructive barrage that should have annihilated the human force within minutes. Instead, the human ships seemed to phase partially out of normal space, their exotic defensive systems rendering them effectively immune to conventional weapons. The alien attacks passed harmlessly through targets that appeared solid but existed partially in parallel dimensions. The human counterattack demonstrated technologies that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about the fundamental limits of physics. Weapons that manipulated quantum probability fields caused enemy ships to spontaneously disintegrate at the molecular level. Defensive systems created localized space-time distortions that redirected incoming attacks into parallel dimensions. Within hours, the coalition of concerned worlds had ceased to exist as a military force. The surviving ships broadcast desperate surrender signals while their commanders tried to comprehend what had just happened to their fleets. Admiral Mitchell's final transmission was heard throughout the galaxy as communication networks carried word of humanity's victory. Let this serve as notice to all galactic civilizations. Humanity seeks peace and cooperation with our neighbors. However, any species that threatens human civilians or attempts to conquer human territory will face the full consequences of their actions. The message was received by the progenitor collective on their ancient homeworld, where Ambassador Thexaval studied the battle recordings with growing amazement. The young human species had not only refused subordination, but had demonstrated technologies that exceeded even progenitor capabilities. For the first time in millions of years, the galaxy's oldest civilization faced the possibility that they were no longer the most advanced species among the stars. Humanity had proven that sometimes the hunter could become the hunted, and that underestimating humans was the last mistake any civilization would ever make. Captain Elena Vasquez, now serving as an intelligence liaison aboard Admiral Mitchell's flagship, watched the aftermath of the battle with quiet satisfaction. The attack on her merchant vessel had triggered a chain of events that established humanity as the galaxy's newest apex power. Never again would any alien species make the mistake of ambushing a human ship, because they now understood that humanity would respond with unrelenting fury that could reshape the balance of power among the stars.